That snow does not melt for us. And when a bird sings, it does not sing for us. Why then do we hear it as music? And that unlocks, for me, the indisputable fact that I evolved here on planet Earth. This is my home. And that transformation is no longer a question of how expensive is it to recycle, right? Would you ask a question if anyone you loved was in the hospital? How much is it going to cost to keep them alive, right? When we fall back in love with planet Earth, the environmental crisis will be seen for what it really is, not an environmental crisis. It's a spiritual crisis of how we view our place. And I'm not trying to create a reality here. I'm saying that by listening, you enter the reality, the unedited experience.
Hi, Gordon. How are you? Good to see you, but just as importantly, to hear you.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Oh, good.
You sound happy.
I am.
What does happy sound like?
You know, happy has a lightness to it. You know, you can tell immediately, no matter how old or young the person may be, if they lack those edges, you know, whether they're a round rock or a jagged chert off a mountaintop, you know, that has a long ways to go.
You know, Gordon, how would you even describe the work that you do? You know, I'm such a fan, but how would I describe that for the audience?
I think that the best way to describe my work is to say that I am a listener. All right, that's what I do for a living. I don't claim to be particularly good at listening, and that's, of course, how I got into becoming a listener. It was one of those things where, unfortunately, I thought I was a good listener. And if you have that thought yourself, it's one of the primary indicators that you probably aren't. Because to think you're a good listener is a dangerous thought because, you know, you just really don't know what you're going to hear. And, you know, you never listen for something because that for something has never even happened.
So was this a gradual realization that you like to hear, you know?
No, it was sudden, unexpected, in many ways challenging and heartbreaking and disappointing. I thought I was going to be a plant pathologist. Not only that, but I thought I was going to be a great plant pathologist because I was headed off to the University of Wisconsin, Madison, in a graduate program. Right. All of this, but on my way there, you know, as things sometimes happen in life, I pulled over to get some rest, and a thunderstorm changed the way that I would listen forever. I'd been in plenty of thunderstorms, but this one, maybe it's because I wasn't thinking. I was too tired to think, and I was just there, and it was late summer, it was hot, and the rain was cool, that I decided I'm not moving. I'm just going to stay laying down and soak it all in. And that's when my ears really opened up fully for the first time.
Now, I love the sound of thunder, you know, I mean, but I think when I'm looking at it and I'm seeing it, right? I'm, you know, seeing it and I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
Did you close your eyes at that point?
No, you can. And isn't that marvelous that we never close our ears like we can our eyes? There are no earlids, right? Never evolved, far too dangerous. Sound is information. We need that news and information flow. It depends. When I listen, because it takes time to listen, you can't glimpse it. That slows my eyes down, and I often see things I never noticed before, particularly in the forest. But with thunder, for one thing, there's so many different kinds of thunder. And while the initial clap is something, you know, that strike giving you all kinds of information. What I most enjoy is its echo, and in some places echoes, because that's the information the land and the atmospheric conditions super influence. So some of the best thunder in the world is in the Amazon rainforest. Yeah.
I have a question about that moment where, it was the thunderstorm, which I don't know that you
Yeah.
can see the thunder, Jesse. I think it's the lightning. Well, maybe you do
Oh.
see the sound, but to really listen, which I don't know how to do, but from what I'm trying to imagine what you're saying, it just forces you to be in the moment. And
Yes.
is it a being, a consciousness? Like what was it about
Well,
that transformational moment?
basically, it was so authentic, it was so real and informative and unexpected, and I was like hands off as far as what the thunder needed to be for me. It didn't need to be the world's best thunder or anything. It was just there, and I was just there, and I was no longer searching for importance. I was just there. And makes me laugh now because it probably has been the single most important event in my life, but at the time it was just, oh, okay, that was cool. And then I got back in the car and continued to drive to everything else. But that everything else didn't measure up to the thunder, all right? The everything else, Jesse, I have to say, we get in our way so much in life when we search for something intentionally. It's nice when you can do something like listen and get out of the way, and especially not listen to an edited production, all right? Because then you're listening to what someone else wants you to hear, all right? And that comes with intention and all of their goals, not your goals, all right? And as a listener, and I want to say that everything that I record, everything that I've offered to people, they're entirely unedited. I'm not going to claim to be the artist. I'm just the messenger. My work is just like being in that thunderstorm on that transformative day for me. I hope, because these are real places from a truly sonically beautiful earth, that in some way we can walk away with going, wow, I never listened like this before. And that might encourage others to listen. But if you, Jesse, and Priscilla, if you think you're going to listen, like you just tell yourself, okay, let me try listening. I'll tell you, dollars to donuts, you won't be able to do it. The brain is way too clever. I think the way to listen, and I can walk you through the steps that I often repeat for myself on a daily basis, all right, no matter where I am, in the city or in the country or in a wilderness, any place on earth. And the first step is what is the furthest sound you can hear? Let's take a moment, okay? Now, as you wait for the furthest sound, your auditory horizon is now expanding to its limits. Notice that if you're indoors, some of the sounds that you hear have actually gone through walls. Our eyes do not go through walls, but sound does, all right? The auditory horizon in the wilderness is miles distant. In the city, it can be measured in blocks, depending on what's going on. Then, now ask yourself, what is the faintest sound you can hear? Now, just listen to the place. All sounds at once. Listen to the place. Take a deep breath. Notice how you feel. Notice how you feel. That's your only job, is to notice how you feel. and take all sounds in with equal value. Now that feeling I've come to learn is the echo of silence. And in our hurried worlds, and I say worlds plural because there seem like there's so many parallel realities we function on that can switch and change based on a text or an email or a voice of somebody close to us. And we just have to get back in touch with, for the first time, I'll just call because it's, a lot of the language that I use for my own internal conversations aren't with words, it's feeling, emotions, and I consider this the first human language, the language that's common to all human beings. I'll give it the phrase of my ancient self, because you're looking right now at coming up on Monday, I guess it is, I'll be 69 years old, and I know that that's just kind of something you tell people. It doesn't mean that much, right? Except maybe on the countdown timer, all right? I inherited this body, my senses, my possible way of being by a long string of ancestors, most of which lived 35,000 years ago. And, it's not about modern times. I'm not truly at my core a modern person. And if I'm able then to engage, because all those ancestors, they somehow made the right choices. That's why I'm here, right? And yours too, right? So how did they make those choices, right? And I think we can still make those choices today, those right choices, but it all starts the same way that it did for them, which is through listening. We think of ourselves as visually dominated people, all right, today. I think that's really quite common. My wife and I, we have this argument all the time because she's so concerned about hair. She's been a hairstylist until she recently retired. And yet evolution doesn't agree with any animal being visually dominant because eyelids are common. If information is that important, why are we able to turn it off? We never turn off our ears. And also, why is my vision just on the front of my head? And why does it not give me a 360 like my ears do? Sound is information, and it provides the 24/7 information flow of some information that could be essential to your survival. And this is one of the most important pieces of information that's still alive for us today, and we can use it in our daily lives. And if we look at the graph that shows our sensitivity range as we go from 20 vibrations per second, those really low sounds, to 20,000 vibrations per second, or those really high upper limit pitches, we find that we don't have equal sensitivity. Our information peaks really clearly at 2.5 kilohertz, of which is not the human voice, really. When I say the word sound with the S, yes, that's 2.5 kilohertz, but a lot of my voice is way lower than that. You still understand me. But 2.5 kilohertz is a perfect match to bird song. And when the birds are singing, there's food, there's water, there's a favorable season to get the young off the nest. That bird song is, in fact, the primary indicator of habitats prosperous for humans. I believe the reason why we have that peak is simply because our ancestors as nomadic hunters and gatherers had to make critical decisions. Which way do I go? I have 360 choices in front of me. Yet the faintest sound you can hear in the morning when you start your travels is birdsong. And the dawn chorus, that planetary tune that circles continuously, this global song that Earth is singing to us every day, has transformed in composition with the evolution of life itself. And now we're one of those, I guess you could say, players in that chorus that really aren't listening to the rest of the band. And we're out of tune. We're really out of tune, but we know it now. We know it now. we're all trying to reconnect, and we'll reconnect when we start listening, right?
Now, you want to be to study plants. And so you have this experience, right? So you must have been drawn to nature, for a good part of your life. You must have enjoyed being in the outdoors, I imagine.
Yeah, I did study plants. That was also kind of an accident. I liked to gather my food from the wild when I was backpacking because it lightened my load, and I poisoned myself. And I thought, maybe before I start digging tubers out of the ground, I should take a botany course or so. And that's where I started studying botany, but it turned into a philosophy on life. Think about this. Plants don't need to go anywhere, right? They're seed lands or whatever their propagation and dissemination is, and then they make do with what they have. It's not about being someplace else. It's about doing with what you have where you are, and that begins now. And when I got to see the way a plant reaches up towards the sunlight, which is essentially its business plan, right? Its growth plan. The sunlight is the currency, and it wants to get that sunlight to operate a successful business. And the reason why, pine trees look different than oak trees is that they have different strategies. And oak trees are about 200 million years more recent in their evolution than the pine trees. So it was sort of not just about studying life, but it was about studying the advice life was giving me on how I might live. But that in itself, it's argued, and there is recent evidence that plants do listen, that they do respond to vibrations, particularly underground, right? And direct root growth based on that information, which is huge. Think of how many creatures live underground and have access to that same information and must use it too. So I guess that's how I was able to do so well in botany for so long and not be a listener, because I couldn't see ears on plants. Otherwise, I think I would have studied it really closely.
So, but even when you're studying plants, in some sense, it's some Linnaean philosophy of different kinds of plants and how they fit in their different systems, right, is what I hear you.
Yeah. The taxonomy of plants are interesting, certainly deal with the evolution of life, but also I'll argue that even while botanists say that grasses and orchids are the most highly evolved plants on Earth, I say no. All the plants we see today are the most highly evolved plants on Earth. There's the ones that are now at the growing tips of evolution. We're all winners. We all have our answers. And that's the same for the animal world. We're not superior to even a butterfly. The butterfly is a perfect example of who you need to be to pollinate those kinds of flowers and live an amazing life. Yeah, just an amazing life.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So you have this experience where you're at a road stop and you hear this, and you go on from it like, oh, that was something unusual. How does it get from that to, I'm going to start to record these sounds and think about the sounds?
Well, when I found out, when I suddenly believed I was not a good listener, not only was I not a good listener, I had never truly listened before until that thunderstorm. I thought, well, if I haven't been listening, I probably don't know who I am, and that was certainly true. I don't know who I want to be. Becoming a plant pathologist, that's a random guess. And so, but trained as a scientist, the way you investigate any problem is through instruments. And I literally went into an electronics store. It was a Radio Shack in Madison, Wisconsin, and asked the salesperson for a microphone. And he said, "What kind of microphone?" And I didn't even know there were choices. Okay. And so when he saw the look on my face, he just grabbed something and asked me for my driver's license because I didn't have a credit card. All right. And no cash. And then I walked outside listening through a microphone into the city of Madison, which I had listened to, those sound waves, those same sound waves were hitting me of traffic and everything like this when I walked in, but I was deaf to them. My listening was so impaired. But when I walked outside, all my brain wanted to do was hear what the microphone heard. And it was like the perfect walk around, I could just go walk right around my brain and all its little sneaky tricks on filtering out stuff that it knew for some reason was not important. And my brain now was giving total importance to that microphone, and the microphone without a brain. All of a sudden, I was, I was stupid. And that is who I needed to be. I just needed to forget about my higher education and just be stupid and take it all in. Like, do you remember the first time you put on a face mask?
I don't.
Okay.
A face mask?
Yeah.
You mean
What?
Yeah.
COVID face? What kind of face mask?
You mean like
you
mask or a...
Oh, no, sorry. Goggles for like swimming underwater.
Sure.
All right.
Sure. Yeah.
Think. Whether it's a lake, whether it's the ocean.
Yeah. I remember those. Yeah.
Okay. And how transformative it was when you didn't know what was down there, and now you did. You had a clear view, and you had to jump out of the water, maybe like I did.
Yeah.
First time I wore a face mask, and fathom how much new information was coming. Did I really want to swim there? And then you get back in the water and begin to explore and discover. It was that kind of thing when I held that microphone. And so I finished up the semester and then essentially dropped out and returned to Seattle and took a job as a bike messenger, one that I thought I would do for a while just until I could find a real job. But another accident happened in my life, and that involved a car. On my very first day, here I am trying to become a better listener, but no microphone in my hand, both hands on the handlebars and paddling through what I would refer to as rivers of metal. And then, bam, a car hits me. And I'm on the ground. The car sees that I'm not killed and drives off because they're late for a meeting. And then I go into the hospital. And while I have my time to think, I could roll back my memory. And I had all the information I needed to avoid being hit. My ears were telling me the proximity of the car, its acceleration, its erratic moves and everything. And that ultimately was exhilarating. It's like, wow, now I have a way to become a better listener. And being a bike messenger also gave me the time off to go explore in nature. But nature wasn't my first way of listening. I started recording downtown Seattle. The punk rock scene was just like raving. And I record punk rockers and the things that they were saying to each other. I'd go to a very scenic overlook on Queen Anne Hill, and you see the Space Needle in downtown. And I set up my microphone so I could just listen to the whole city at once. And people assumed I was taking a picture of that beautiful view. I wanted to listen to the sound. So they would walk right in. Would have made a great shot to see a young couple on a first date. And I'm listening to their conversation, right? And this very lonely conversation when they're trying to be happy and show their best side, but I'm hearing people ask questions and the other person not answering that question. I'm like listening to two bad listeners trying to get to know each other. And it was like, well, at least I'm not the only bad listener, right? Everybody's on their journey.
I have a question about the values of a hierarchy of what we're listening to, because if you're putting the microphone just out and it's capturing whether it's in the forest or Seattle, and you're saying you're not really able, we don't hear, how do you think, or have you been able to kind of retrace why we value a certain sound over another? Is there an emotional connection? Like
we value, well, first of all, I know from bioacoustics, and all animal species have the ability to hear. We're all born listeners, all right? That's what we do. That's why we're here. We're a successful species. We're born listeners. But then we go to school, and it often happens sooner. The teacher stands up and says, "Class, listen." And she means, listen to me. all right? And that means if you're going to listen to her and be graded on that and everything else involved, that means you're going to filter out the heat system, the ventilation. You're going to try not to listen to what Johnny's talking about, whispering. You learn to recognize, and then, of course, the media itself is very active. Visual technology was during the Industrial Revolution when we were having all this noise pollution created for the first time. The visual technology was the simple technology that could be used in noise polluted areas, and that's how it advances, and the whole thrust and the transformation of modern life to being visually dominated. If we go back to the literature in the 1800s, when the Industrial Revolution is just taking off, we find the nature, John Muir being a perfect example. He doesn't describe the scenery with utmost importance. Sure, it's included, it's one of our senses, but the sounds of nature, they are the earliest sound recordings that I think are, with pen and paper, the available technology of that time. Everything is absolutely true. He describes, for example, the sound of snow melting into music. And when I first read that in studying Muir, I thought, oh, beautiful phrase, how poetic. And then I caught myself and I said, maybe it's not just poetic. Maybe it's science. And so I went up onto Hurricane Ridge at Olympic National Park, and I recorded on an August afternoon at the edge of a snowfield, the snow melting. And I guarantee if I were to play this for you right now, you would not do anything but go, oh my God, how is this possible? And half the audience would want to get up and dance a little bit. It's very creative, original material that some way the math of melt does turn into music. And you can tell me too, was I off on the assessment of it being sort of a variation of reggae? Is it its own genre, right? But we also have to ask ourselves, that snow does not melt for us. And when a bird sings, it does not sing for us. Why then do we hear it as music? And that unlocks, for me, the indisputable fact that I evolved here on planet Earth. This is my home. And that transformation is no longer a question of how expensive is it to recycle, right? Would you ask a question if anyone you loved was in the hospital? How much is it going to cost to keep them alive, right? When we fall back in love with planet Earth, the environmental crisis will be seen for what it really is, not an environmental crisis. It's a spiritual crisis of how we view our place. And I'm not trying to create a reality here. I'm saying that by listening, you enter the reality, the unedited experience. While all my recordings are unedited, and I do like them, or I wouldn't have tried to share them, I think they offer lessons for all of us. They have their own intrinsic questions. And every sound that I sent you has its lesson, all right? That before we talked today, I decided, gosh, what did I send Jesse, right? And I was taken through this wonderful life's journey of all these natural, wild concert halls and all the voices of these, I'll call them musicians, performers, whatever, the singers, croakers, howlers, that there is emotion. There is emotion in their voice. I'm absolutely sure that even the most simplest creatures, since they create emotion for us, they are emotion. But what's interesting too about all the places that I recorded, every sound other than wind, every sound in water, all the voices, those animals themselves, they've died. But the place itself has a voice. And it has not died. But yes, it's disappearing. Because until Quiet Parks International was established, there was not one place on Earth off limits to noise pollution. And we think that, but there is, I should correct myself and say, aviation is the number one polluter of wilderness areas, and there is not one wilderness area in the world which is avoided by commercial aircraft. All the regulations and advisories affect only that which is below 5,000 feet. And it's not just bad for us to practice listening and become acquainted now with the faint, high meaning information, all right? But it's bad for wildlife. I mean, they don't text, they don't cell phones, they don't have that technology that we use to communicate. How else are they going to be able to attract a mate other than sing intelligibly? And they learn their songs from their parents, all right? And if you can't hear your parents' songs that they learned when it wasn't as noise polluted, and they couldn't hear their parents, so that when you get to true places today that are quiet, places that we hope to establish it as quiet parks in the future. We already have one. But when you get to these places that are naturally quiet, you get to hear not just the birds sing, but the birds sing from the continuum of uninterrupted performance, learning, improvisation, improvement. The message is so much deeper, inspiring, more profound. It's really one of the things I like to tell people. If they like my recordings, well, stop listening to them and go to a quiet place and have the live concert, because there's so much more happening than what I've been able to record during my 40-year career traveling.
How do you know where to go? Like you go to Yosemite, you go to Yosemite, you go to a place called the Grasslands, or there's Yosemite, and then Yosemite's huge. Like where's
Well, the system for where you go is a very long process that you could see that your chances of finding a naturally quiet place on planet Earth is going to be very time-consuming. But fortunately, today you can go to quietparks.org, and we have a map showing the places that we're working on trying to preserve. And particularly if you want to go for the big one all at once, our first wilderness quiet park, Zabalo River Wilderness Quiet Park, deep in the Amazon jungle. The indigenous people, the Kofan, have invited us. They want us to come listen. They are an unbroken culture of listeners. Amazing the talent that they have. They'll keep you safe from the Amazon, and that's huge. But I will say that at the heart of biodiversity, there's so many performers, it can be over challenging. It's not really beginner material. I tend to like the temperate, that's why I live in Washington State, because the performance of the sounds are more spacious. Earth is a solar-powered jukebox. So as you lower the amount of solar energy that's firing up the bioacoustic system and giving it, its loudness and complexity, as you get further into the temperate, it gets more spacious, it gets quieter, and echoes become a really important part of the performance. And that echo is truly the voice of the land, right? And everything that happens. And song structure of birds, it actually changes. The western meadowlark being a great example of how it sings differently in an area where it can hear its echoes. It's a lot like how stadium acoustics changed the sound of rock and roll. That's old news. That's been going on for thousands of years in the world of wildlife. It's great. The Boundary Waters Canoe area in northern Minnesota is about to be awarded Quiet Park status. We also have Glacier National Park about to be awarded. And we have Haleakala Crater, which is also known as the quietest place on Earth. All right. And by that, I mean that it's very low decibels. The quietest times in Haleakala Crater is negative decibels because the 0 dB is based on a person's ability to hear, not based on what vibrations might be there, but we can calculate and measure even lower than what people can hear. And many of these quiet areas also are good candidates for dark night skies. So while you're enjoying the concert, you can also look up and contemplate what it truly means to hear so much and yet be only a speck in the cosmos. Right?
Because you can see the star field.
Yeah, it's just, but to go the other way around and say, I'll go to International Dark Sky Park and I'll find natural quiet. No, that's not true, because Rainbow Bridge, which was the first dark sky park in the dark sky park system, it's right next to a highway. I was there myself and listening just last year, and it was really disappointing to me, although other people thought it was quiet because they have a different standard. They were just listening to what they wanted to hear, not listening to the place itself.
There's lots of places, like we're talking about craters, but you could just go to a forest that isn't particularly known and there's a symphony going on. No?
Oh yes. In fact, that's one of my favorite things to do is go hear unheard sound, right? But do try to go to a place that has not gone under land management. That's not, because all forests are not equal. Tree farms are that. Farms, it's not much different than a cornfield.
Right.
Go to a wilderness area, and this is where a little knowledge of botany does help, because you can look at the landscape and the vegetation, and this can be done from a picture. And from that, based on leaf condition, which tells you all about season, stuff like this, you have a pretty good indication of what it's going to sound like. Yeah.
Is it poetry? Is this like different, let's do it. Is it poetry?
Yeah. It's actually, I refer to, especially in the spacious areas of North America, the poetics of space. I thought it was sound that really drew me. That's why my trade name is the Sound Tracker. I thought I was all about sound, but as I'm getting older, I understand that, yes, the sound is important, but only important to me ultimately for the aesthetics on how it reveals the space. Okay? Now, dig this. All right? You can hear in a very quiet place, you can hear a jet from 20 miles away through the atmosphere when the sun is rising, right before the sun rises, and atmospheric conditions for sound propagation are ideal. And so the radius of a circle that has 20 miles is more than 1,000 square miles, right? It's 1,200 and something, all right? Think of that. When the jet's not there, you have the ability to listen to, more than 1,000 square miles.
Yeah.
Think of that. Think that is your area of surveillance. We'll just call it that. But what I think is particularly attractive is this 2-second decay time that we design our concert halls for. Ideally, we as humans seem to gravitate and agree upon the 2-second decay when a musician stops playing, that we can still hear audibly the vibrations for 2 seconds before it falls to the silence. And that speed of sound being 1,100 feet per second, basically at room temperature, that is our personal space, right? But now in our modern condition, our personal space is, well, I'll tell you what my personal space is right now. It's like 5 feet that way, 5 feet that way, and another 12 feet behind me.
Yeah.
I'm in a cage, all right? But when we can take a wonderful walk, like up the Hoh Valley, the Rainforest World Heritage Site, which also, by the way, has a 2-second decay time, you can be in your true personal space, right? That just feels good. It feels good on the skin, on the mind, and on all your senses. And your eyes see what your ears are hearing. You're smelling what your other senses are telling you. That you're able to literally make sense of the world. And that's why having a true wilderness experience, I think, is the fastest way to be optimistic, like I am, about we have a beautiful future. Yes, it's difficult. It's always been difficult throughout our past and our evolution, but we're about to enter a very beautiful time where instead of looking for answers, we'll start listening for answers, because that's truly the way we're wired to handle complex information systems effortlessly.
Gordon, thank you so much. This was incredible. I did not talk as much as I usually do because I really wanted to listen to you.
And I got to apologize. Jesse, you started out by just, I think, giving me a green light here to speak my passion. I appreciate you, but honestly, I don't literally run at the mouth as a normal human being. But when you take the cork out to talk about what's in my heart,
beautiful, fantastic.
Wonderful. We're grateful. But one thing I do want to ask you. So not everybody who hopefully is listening or watching this podcast has access to some of these places, but the way that you've kind of talked about this, it's like craving. It's making me crave that, but it just, even for an urban dweller, it's still possible to still start to have this experience. And even if what we're hearing are jets and birds and cars, but still this process of becoming.
Yeah, it all starts with listening. I do encourage everyone to go to the quietparks.org website. There we have additional information. Our mission is to save quiet for the benefit of all life, and it's also to make quiet a daily choice for most of the world's population.
Okay.
Good to see both your faces.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye.